Securities Industry Act 2016 Act 929. In line with one of its core mandates, the Commission has introduced Ghana's Maiden Capital Market Master Plan. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we unpack the issues surrounding the Market Master Plan and what one should expect.
Once upon a memory, an iconic representation of the most powerful love in the world was showcased. The light of love that never gets dim. A mother's love. This Mother's Day. Hold up. This Mother's Month. MX24's got the perfect treat for our mothers and mother figures. Who be your mommy? All you have to do is open a CBG account for your mommy figure with a minimum deposit of 100 Ghana cedis. Then link the account to *924# mobile banking service. Now tell us what makes this mommy special and why we have to honor her via our DM on social media handles Facebook and Instagram at MX24GH and at CBG Bank Limited. The best entry selected will be rewarded with cash prizes from CBG. Charlie, don't slack ho. Be the reason for mommy's excitement this month of May. We did do one for mommy. Terms and conditions apply.
Celebrities should be able to understand that political seasons come and go.
If a woman is running for a CEO or a COO something and then she's not married, then this woman is going to be rude.
Politics is the act of decision making.
You go to school and you learn a bunch of stuff that really you don't end up using. So then what's the purpose?
The quantum of graduates coming out of school every year, they realize that the job is inadequate.
For skin that's dull and dry, Vaseline Cocoa Glow with pure cocoa and shea butter, blended with micro droplets of Vaseline jelly, revealing glowing radiant skin for glowing radiance.
Welcome from that break. Our conversation tonight is on the core functions of the Securities and Exchange Commission and their new baby, the Capital Market Master Plan. I'm sure you'll be wondering what this Market Master Plan is all about. To help us deal with these issues is none other than the Deputy Director General of the Commission. He's in charge of finance, Mr. Paul Ababio. A very good evening to you, sir. You're welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you, Akor, and good evening to your viewers as well.
Right, many thanks. So, from a mom who is far away in Papase, it's around Kaswa, she dropped out of school a long time ago. She would want to find out what's the regulatory role of SEC.
Okay. So, as you rightly mentioned, the Securities and Exchange Commission was established under Act 929, the Securities Industry Act 929. But that was a revised act. The first act was actually the PNDC Law 1993, Securities Industry Law 1993 under the PNDC. And it was established to supervise and regulate the development of an efficient securities market in which investors are protected. Our functions include monitoring of market operators, including fund managers, investment advisors, primary dealers, custodians, and even the Ghana Stock Exchange. We regulate the Ghana Stock Exchange as well. We also advise the minister on issues of policy.
So Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance, yes. who is responsible for the functioning of the financial sector as well. Part of our role is also to monitor the solvency of the entities that we supervise.
That's whether they are making profit or they are very strong
or they can continue to operate, whether they should have a license or not, whether they are doing the right things according to the law. In line with that, we also prepare and issue what we call guidelines, regulations, and directives on how the markets should operate. And we also try and take actions that help to develop and stabilize the market from time to time. So in a nutshell, that is what we do. Let me give a bit of a practical example of how people might have interacted with the capital markets.
Yes, sir.
So for instance, if you want to buy treasury bills, which are bonds or instruments that the government of Ghana issues to fund its operations, you would go to a bank or a broker dealer and you fill a form to buy the treasury bills. With as little as 100 cedis, people can buy treasury bills. And essentially, the entity you're dealing with is typically what we call a primary dealer, which if it's a bank, in which case they are also regulated by the SEC, or you're dealing with a broker dealer who trades those fixed income securities on behalf of its clients. That is also regulated by the SEC. If you have a pension, your pension funds are managed by your trustee, who is an independent third party regulated by the MPRA, but the trustee relies on advice from fund managers who SEC regulates, and also uses banks as custodian banks that are also regulated by SEC.
So SEC wears many hats.
Exactly. Then another category of asset class is what we call collective investment schemes. So we have mutual funds, where people pull together resources, and it's a vehicle that's established to hold assets for investors. So that's one, we regulate those kinds of schemes. So we have mutual funds and we have unit trust that we regulate. In 2019, we actually issued a new guideline for REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. We don't have a formal one established yet, but a licensed one. But we're in the process of reviewing applications that have come through. And then we also issued guidelines on private funds. That covers private equity and then what we call venture capital. So for the regular person on the street, if you think of a business either runs on its own money, the money of the owner, or money that has borrowed from the bank or from other investors. Besides borrowing from other investors, they can also raise capital
on their own.
So a private equity or venture capital firm invests in businesses that are not necessarily listed on the stock exchange, but who need equity or some combination of equity and debt capital. So in some sense, people are doing, when you give money to your friend to do his business, it's private equity. You know, you yourself are funding a fellow businessman. So those are a few areas. I also touch on one exciting area that we also supported the launch of, which is the Ghana Commodity Exchange. And this was launched in 2018. We also developed the guidelines around it. We regulate the operator, but we also regulate some of the people who are involved in its activities as well.
So some of your rules have been given to the Ghana Commodity Exchange?
No, it's similar to what we have in the Ghana Stock Exchange, as in it's an exchange. So we regulate securities, we regulate the issuers of securities, and then we also regulate the exchanges, the platforms on which securities trade. Because the platforms also have to meet certain standards. They have to ensure that they have adequate disclosure mechanisms, they have adequate infrastructure, and they have adequate what we call collateral in case there are failed trades. So on the commodity exchange, people can trade in corn, in soya, in rice.
Maize, millet.
Exactly, all in Ghana. Millet is not on the exchange yet, but maize is.
How soon would our brothers and sisters from the north have their millet on the platform?
There are certain criteria that they look at. So soya, for instance, is on it. And they also look at the supply chain. So the exchange makes a determination, but maize obviously is also grown in the north at a large extent. So the exchange makes that decision as to the kinds of commodities that they will take on board.
Right.
Okay.
Walking into your office, I saw a bold inscription, to be a top-tier market regulator in Africa.
Yes.
That's one of the visions, or the vision of SEC.
Yes.
How do you intend to achieve this?
So I think there are a few elements to that. And we call them our strategic priorities. So we are looking at education. The education of the general public on, one, the securities market, the role of market operators, and the methods or the regulatory regime that we have in place. Understanding it is a big part of the regulatory work, because when you interact with the regular people and they appreciate what the regulator does, that in itself helps to boost our markets. We also look at educating the market operators to ensure that they have robust operations, they understand some of the dynamics of operating in the business, and to build capacity for some of the new products we want to introduce. Then we also look at educating ourselves as a regulator. So we look at building capacity for us to understand some of the new things we do to improve how we operate. Now with COVID, obviously digitization has become very critical. So we also are digitizing our operations as we speak. And that will help us to become one of the leading regulators. So I've mentioned education. The other leg is enforcement. Investors look at how does the regulator enforce the rules?
And that has been weak over the last few years.
It has often been said that Ghana has some of the best rules, but enforcement of it is always a challenge. So we've really strengthened our enforcement arm. We've taken a decision to apply the rules, and you've seen some of that activity over the past few years. So that's a big part of becoming a top-tier regulator. The last leg is also market development. So developing the necessary rules and guidelines to guide the growth of the market, building adequate infrastructure at SEC as well, enhancing our facilities, enhancing our IT systems, and also ensuring that it all works together. And then forming platforms for interaction. And I'll talk more into that as we progress in our conversation. The last leg, but also the most important, is that we are a member of the International Organization of Securities Commissions. It's called IOSCO. And part of the mandate of that group is to develop standards, to share information, and to create a platform for regulators to also engage in interactions. Because clearly in Ghana, we are the only capital markets regulator. So if we need to get ideas from other people, we'll talk to our fellow regulators, but we also talk to other regulators outside of our jurisdiction. So that interaction is important. However, Ghana is not a signatory to the Enhanced Memorandum of Understanding, Multilateral Memorandum of Understanding,
So
which is an MMOU. Exactly. So we are not necessarily a full member, and we want to become a signatory, a member of the MMOU, so that our status is enhanced on the global platform. And that will also drive us towards being a top-tier regulator.
So how are we then gearing ourselves to be a full member of this body?
Thank you for that, and it's a very important point. There was an issue with our law. When we did our law in 2016, part of the momentum was actually to allow for us to become a signatory. However, there was a technical challenge in the law that had to be amended. So towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, we actually went through the process of amending it. We started it back in 2018, but it took a while. Amending our laws is also a difficult process.
3 years down the line, we're still
exactly.
talking
So we've
about
done we've done that amendment now, and it's been passed by the presidency. So that is in effect. The other documents we have to attach and then resubmit our application. Then that puts us back in the process. But before I forget, a last leg around becoming a top tier is having a strategic plan that is clear for the market operators and that is clear for international participants to know where the regulator wants to take the market.
And I'm
where
sure
the
that's been
policy
necessary
direction is
conversation, the
going.
capital market master plan.
Exactly. So that's where we see ourselves becoming a top tier. These are the initiatives we've taken over the past 3 or 4 years, and we look forward to implementing some of these ideas that we've brought to the market.
Once you've taken us there, why don't we just go
Delve
into the
into
details?
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's this capital market master plan? We understand this is the first of its kind for the country.
Yes. There have been previous financial sector development programs. They call them FinSIP. FinSIP, which were done with the support of the World Bank, but they covered the whole financial sector. So looked at banking, looked at insurance, and then looked at the capital markets as well. And SEC was sort of a subset of that. But there was a need for a focused strategic plan that dealt with the capital market in its entirety. Because the capital market itself is quite broad. You have the stock exchange, as I mentioned, which has actually 3 markets. People don't realize the stock exchange is not just the stocks. There's the main board, but there's also the Ghana Alternative Exchange. And then there's the Ghana Fixed Income Market, GIFM, which is where the bonds, both corporate and government bonds, also trade. And so there's a need to have a strategic view that lays out some of the broad strategic initiatives that not only SEC will take, but market operators too are expected to take, that we also expect support from other regulators. So some of the initiatives in the plan are not just about the Commission. It's about national policy. It's about the role the central bank plays in the capital markets. It's about the role that government ministries, when they talk about raising capital, how they approach it. We mentioned green bonds. We mentioned currency trading. We mentioned fintech. And these are areas that not just touch capital markets, they touch other sectors of the economy. So the plan tries to lay out some of the large blocks and then present a 10-year vision as to where should we go in the next 10 years. So that even the ordinary person on the street can understand that, okay, when I'm dealing with the capital markets, what they are trying to achieve. When they're interacting with SEC, they know these are the priorities of SEC. And these are things that government also agrees to. And it's a 10-year plan, so that it's not like there's a change in government and then you put down the plan. The next government will have to take the plan.
So this plan will survive successive
and determine and determine which aspects are a priority for us and do even enhance that. Having a roadmap allows you to make changes along the margins. But in essence, we've all agreed that this is what we are choosing to do. And a big part of the exercise of the master plan was that we involved the market operators. So the fund managers were involved, the stock exchange was involved, the fixed income market was involved. We had NIC present, we had NPRA also giving some inputs. We had the Bank of Ghana also making some input. So we had a wide range of consultations leading up to the finalization of the plan.
We know of the financial market, the stock market, and the bond market. How different is this market plan from these 3?
So this document is really, okay, in terms of the markets.
The markets.
The bond market and the stock market are all part of what's called the capital markets. And in a sense, when you talk about financial markets, you may look at, I would say, 3 broad categories. One would be the money market, which tends to do with the bank deposits and I would even include currency. Yeah, well, yes, I'll call it currency. And then there's sort of the capital markets, which deals with, I would say, 2 categories. Technically financial instruments, but also you would have a commodities exchange. So even though we often tend to think of capital as more long-term, things like options, things like derivatives come into the capital market, but they can be as short as 3 months. Right, but capital typically is a longer period. So the use of the word capital just implies financial resources. And because we want to differentiate from the banking sector, we say it's a capital market from that perspective.
I know earlier you talked about the role of the Securities and Exchange Commission, in which you make mention of the fact that we need to be signatories to a specific law before we are recognized by the international body. I want to ask you, of you, what's the current state of our country's capital market as compared to countries like Malaysia, Mauritius, Nigeria?
So, obviously, the likes of Mauritius, Nigeria are much bigger than us, partly as a factor of their economy, but also as a factor of government policy. Because there are markets that have, and your capital market also helps to achieve economic growth, the level of intermediation. If people are putting all their resources into houses without investing in businesses, then you won't have that many companies to list their shares on the exchange. So that's important. So these markets are larger than ours, but this plan will help us to accelerate the growth of our markets. In terms of enforcement and in terms of diversity of products, we are not too far behind, actually. We have, I mentioned that we have the equities, we have the bonds. Now we have commodities. What we don't have is what we call a currency market. We also don't have what we would call a derivatives market, so where futures and options are traded. Bank of Ghana has initiated what we call repos, repurchase agreements, and they've also started doing forward sales of the currency. So if you need, in the past, if you needed CDs today, you have to have your dollars today. But now you can get to a transaction where you need CDs in 1 week or 1 month. You can get into an offering that BOG does, where you can commit to buy the CDs in a week's time or in 2 weeks or 3 weeks time.
So they keep it for you. So
exactly. So you lock in the rates. So it doesn't matter where the rate goes, you have a view and you take that position. And that helps to mitigate the risk in the system. And that's really part of the role of the market, of financial markets, to help to mitigate risks that people may face. Then people have to have the risk appetite to take that risk, so you can pass on the risk to them.
We understand that our capital market is mainly illiquid, or what has been come to known as, not too stable. What are the plans being put in place to solve some of these challenges in our capital market?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the market liquidity, part of the dynamics obviously comes from the range of securities on the market. We have about 30 stocks on the market now, some of which don't trade all the time. But a lot of stock markets, the SME sector is the largest number, where you'll find the largest number of stocks. If you go to the US, you go to UK, you go to Mauritius, you go to India, you go to Malaysia, you go to Kenya. SMEs tend to be more, they may not need a lot of capital, but because they are the numerous companies in the economy.
Maybe the system is working there.
You find them on the market. So we're also looking at how we increase the role of SMEs on our stock market, right? Because that is where the growth is. That is where they are the suppliers to the large companies. So the companies are doing well. You might even find better growth in smaller companies. It also helps to support the real sector. So it creates jobs, and that can also improve government taxes. But we're also looking at some of the basic products. So I mentioned treasury bills earlier on. How easy is it for the ordinary person on the streets to access some of these investment products? So making it easy for people to access it, for them to buy shares. We're encouraging some of our market operators to digitize their platforms, to allow for people who are not in Accra to also go online and acquire some of these investments, as opposed to limiting them to their geographic zone alone. So that's something that we're looking at. We're also introducing what we call market making. So a lot of times people have shares they want to sell or they want to buy shares and they cannot find a buyer or a seller. A market maker would typically be in the market to buy or sell some positions. They might indicate that, okay, for stock A, B, and C, I will make market on those stocks. So they stand ready to buy any position up to a certain limit that their risk appetite allows. And they stand ready to sell some of their portfolio if somebody's willing to sell. And they make a spread from those trades. So that's something that will help with that. We are also developing rules around what we call securities lending and borrowing. So oftentimes pension funds are long-term investors. Right. When they buy a share, they are not going to sell it tomorrow until they need to pay their pensioners. So technically, they don't need to hold that share. But if they sell it, the question becomes, at what price can they buy it in the future? So under securities lending and borrowing, if they have a security, they can actually lend it to somebody who wants to speculate on it, say for 1 month or for 1 year, right? And that helps to create liquidity in certain securities because people have a different view. Someone thinks the price will drop, someone thinks the price will go up. It allows for more speculation around that, and that increases liquidity. So those are a few areas. The last leg of the depth is really the pension assets. We've seen a growth in pension assets, and that has also boosted the volume of trades. So while the market cap has not grown overall, the volume of trading has actually increased in terms of shares changing hands, in terms of the pool of funds that is being poured into the stock market. There's more room. There's more room for improvement there, and that's why we need a plan to focus on where can we improve. And these are areas that we think that if we push on these areas, we will see greater liquidity in our market.
So at the end of a 10-year period, what type of capital market do you envisage this country will have?
So the vision of the plan is to have a deep, efficient, diversified, and well-regulated capital market with a full range of products attractive to domestic and international investors. So at the end of that period, it means that we should have, one, a market that is deep, which means that there's a wide range of products available. It is efficient, so it works very well. People can interact with it without much difficulty. It is diversified, and then it's also well regulated, right? And then the other leg is also the attraction. You want it to be attractive to people. So the ordinary man on the streets also feels like, oh, I need to participate in this market. The international investors also find Ghana to be an attractive place. We also envisage, now Ghana is classified as a frontier market, and we are putting in place a mechanism to ensure that we achieve certain benchmarks that will help to reclassify Ghana from a frontier market to an emerging market. So as an emerging market, it means we will be with the heavyweights. So if you take Saudi Arabia, you take Malaysia, you take
US.
Well, US is a developed market. And Singapore is seen as a developed market, but there are China, for instance, an emerging market. The BRICS, Brazil, India, China,
Russia,
South Africa, Russia, yes, are seen as emerging markets. So we want to be in that category. So it's a very ambitious agenda, and I think we have what it takes to get there
within the 10-year period.
Within the 10-year period, yes.
So maybe I don't know 2029.
Yes.
We should see Ghana as an emerging market.
Yes.
So if I want to trade with China, it should be easier for me to do that at the end of the 10-year period.
Yes. So emerging markets typically have a weight in the portfolio. So being part of the African Free Trade Area, AFCA, is to ensure that there's easy movement of goods and services. Because a lot of the costs that we face in Ghana with inflation historically has been that our border crossings add additional premium. And so if you are a regional producer, you're a factory in Ghana, or you invest in a company in Ghana, to sell your products in Cote d'Ivoire or Burkina or Togo or Mali, the barriers you have to go through are difficult, which means the growth opportunity for a Ghanaian SME is only Ghana. Now with the opening up of the free trade zone, when you're an SME or when you're a company operating in Ghana, not only are you looking at Ghana, you're looking at the whole region. And now there's a mechanism for you to move your goods to other regions as long as you meet their regulatory requirements. And now that for the investor, that means a bigger market, both for an investor who's a private investor and an investor through the stock market. Now, to be an emerging market would also mean that we need to have a certain number of companies listed on our market. We need to have a certain volume of daily trading on the market. Now, where will that volume come from? It will come from having these SMEs on the stock market. And
are
when
we
you
getting
are
there? From where you sit, are we getting there?
The SMEs.
Yes.
So we've just launched the master plan. I mean, we've this interaction we are having is part of the education of the public that we are trying to do. And you've seen that SEC has been more public now. You see us almost every other week on TV or on radio. And it is really to embed that the markets are our markets. It's here to stay, and we want to see people participate. We want to see companies that need capital, who have been borrowing for years, to explore engaging advisors, to even issue equity shares on the stock market. And we'll encourage people to look into it. Currently, there's a facility that covers their listing costs, so that up until they raise capital, the advisors' fees are covered under a special facility that we've worked with GSE to establish, right? So that issue of cost is not as significant. And a lot of the advisors will even take a success fee. So you pay them for some initial work to do your analysis, to put together documentation. But the big part of their fee is after they raise the money for you, you see. So that helps to ensure that the interests are aligned.
Right. Yeah, so Mr. Ababio, you make mention of the fact that after this 10-year period, we should have a robust system that will be comparable to the BRICS.
Yes.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Korea. We know these countries boast of a better developed capital market system, and this translates to their faster growth. How certain are we that this plan will translate into an economic growth for us?
Okay. So there are a few linkages, and that is why the Minister for Finance was at our launch. Because as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about SEC. I mentioned that it requires SMEs, but it also requires government policy. For instance, if you take the power generators, Gridco, VRA, ECG, can any of them issue bonds? They have borrowings from the banks. They have capitalization issues. Can they issue shares? That requires government to take a policy and to put in place a mechanism for doing that. And government has started putting some of those mechanisms in place, actually, as we speak. And then if you talk about, let's say, the Planting for Food and Jobs initiative, that's about agric. So there's a value chain there. So what we did in the master plan, which is why I said it transcends the political cycle, is to look at the national priorities. So as a country, we looked at the medium-term strategic plan. We looked at the Vision 2020 document, which was done, I'm sure, a long time ago. We also looked at the National Planning Commission, some of their strategic policies. And we extracted what we would call 4 key priorities that also align to the pillars that we have in the master plan. So for instance, one of the priorities was to increase manufacturing and agricultural value chain. So agriculture and manufacturing help to create jobs. It helps to feed us and helps to control inflation. If you have these things, your economy grows. How do you increase manufacturing? You need capital, you need physical capital, physical assets, you need technology, and then you need people, right? All of these require funding. And so the capital market is saying that we will create an enabling environment for people to raise capital to do some of these things. And that is our pillar 1, which is creating a diversity of investment products and liquidity. So that when those who raise capital, they can get adequate liquidity to run their businesses. So that's one linkage. The second one is to strengthen institutions and rule of law. Part of the risk I told you about is how strong are your regulatory institutions? how strong is the taxman to collect taxes? How strong are the courts
Yeah,
if there's a
enforcement.
dispute? Yes, if there's a dispute, can it be resolved quickly? Especially when it comes to financial services. Everything is money. Time is money in the financial services. So if I have a dispute with somebody and it takes me 3 years to resolve it in the courts, that becomes a disincentive for me to take that risk. Right, so we have to strengthen that interaction. And that maps onto what we call increasing the investor base, right? Because what we are envisaging under that pillar is to have an investor protection fund, to do more investor education, to do some international roadshows, and to also engage some of our regulatory institutions, the judiciary, the Minister for Justice, engage Parliament on creating some of the regulatory frameworks that will support deepening of our investor base.
So that we are all in line, all the three arms of government.
Let me give you a simple illustration. On the CSD now, we have 1 million local CSD accounts. The CSD is a central securities depository.
Okay.
That means that only 1 million people in Ghana have direct accounts on the CSD. This is as of our baseline, which is 2018 in the master plan. Now, if you think of a country of 30 million people, that's less than 3%, or a little around 3%. And want to increase that to around 15 to 20% of the population, because most of the adults should have some kind of investment or the other. Now, that depends on their income levels.
Right.
So they need to have jobs. They need to have the ability to do that. So that's one linkage on the rule of law. The other linkage is the infrastructure and technology. If you look through our political cycles, everybody talks about infrastructure. Everybody talks about technology.
It's a topical issue.
Everybody talks about education, right? And it is things that I would say we don't debate, we don't disagree as a country. And so that also ties into the master plan's pillar 3, which is to strengthen infrastructure and improve market services. You see, so again, that is a long-term view that, look, if we strengthen our infrastructure, if we invest in technology, it is good for the economy, it is good for the market, and it allows for proper intermediation. Okay. Then the last linkage is public service, right? The public sector is one of the largest employers in our economy, and it facilitates business, whether we like it or not. The public service is there to allow businesses to operate. Without the police, there will be no security. Without the registrar general, you can't even register your company.
Exactly.
So if we have a public service that is enhanced and it's delivering its mandate effectively, the economy will grow. And we always refer to the likes of Singapore and South Korea, where the public services are so focused on delivering on their mandate that there's even a competition to get into the public service and also to deliver. Because if you don't deliver, you're out of the door.
Right.
And in the same way, it ties into the capital markets, because we're also looking at improving regulation, enforcement, and the market confidence.
Right.
So as a regulator, we're also looking at how we enhance our service delivery and how we also enhance the service delivery of all the market operators so that it ties into the national developmental strategy. And hopefully, if we're able to achieve these things, one, we have economic growth, but we also see a growth in the capital markets and an increase in the wealth of Ghanaians.
Right. And if you just tuned in, this is Spotlight on MX24 TV. We're having a conversation with the Deputy Director General of SEC in charge of finance, Mr. Paul Ababio. He's throwing more light on what this whole capital market master plan is and how you, the ordinary Ghanaian, can invest in it. When we return from the break, he'll tell us how we all should invest in this capital market plan.
Smiles are one of the most important things we have. Globally, 1 in 2 children suffer from cavities. Pepsodent with maximum cavity protection repairs tiny holes before they become cavities. Because every smile matters.
texting while driving isn't safe and you're calling for a video call.
But why you they do long? Just seconds, I be you know that. Eh? Spoil me with some fine sense.
Babe, are you okay? What just happened? Babe, are you okay? What just happened?
Pepsodent introduces charcoal and lemon essence. The unique combination of natural essences whitens teeth naturally for you and family because every smile matters.
Bad odor is caused by bacteria that form in your underarms. So we created new Rexona antibacterial protection. 10 times more protection against bacteria that cause bad odor. Rexona, it won't let you down.
Welcome from the break. Our conversation tonight is on the core functions of SEC, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have a new baby, the Capital Market Master Plan. And we are happy to be joined by the Deputy Director General of Finance, Mr. Paul Ababio. Before we went on that break, you were talking about the Capital Market Master Plan, the 10-year duration. And we want to find out, how will the implementation go about? We've seen several policies, several documents in which there have been elaborate and grand openings. It's been met with fanfare and all that. Yet these documents sit on the shelves. They do not see the light of the day.
Okay.
How certain are we that this master plan will be different from the other documents?
I would say that you can be very certain about that. Interestingly, some elements of the plan are already being implemented. For instance, the financial sector cleanup that we did was identified in the formulation of the plan as a potential bottleneck to the vision that we hope to achieve. That if we don't address some of those issues, it'll be hard. But we've addressed some of those issues in the master plan. I mentioned some of the guidelines we do, and I mentioned private funds and REITs. That is envisaged in the master plan. We've issued those guidelines now. We are going to engage the market and build capacity in these new products. We've actually done training this year already for our staff on these new products. Right. So in a sense, we've already started implementing some elements. You already hit the ground running. Exactly. But we do have an elaborate implementation framework in place as well. So the plan will have a champion who is the Minister for Finance. And then there's a steering committee that will be established consisting of the key financial sector regulators and some selected people from the industry, so that you have, I would say, an executive view as to how the plan is being implemented. They also have an industry review committee that will consist of industry players and then some people in the real sector that will periodically meet to assess, one, are there emerging areas that the plan didn't foresee that needs to be incorporated into it? Remember, it's a 10-year period, and we all know in Ghana, 10 years' time, a lot of things change. It comes quickly. And so it's important that we always check where we are from time to time. But beyond that is the establishment of also a secretariat, which will have people who will actually see the day-to-day implementation of the plan. Oftentimes, you don't have the people to oversee it and the resources to keep things going, then you lose the momentum. So in this case, we've secured some funding from the World Bank and some funding from the AFDB, who were all present at the launch of the master plan, and they've committed to support us in some of the initiatives. Minister of Finance also committed to support us and has also given some resources to support the implementation of the plan. And then we'll have what we call working groups. So there are 4 working groups envisaged under each of the 4 pillars.
So before you talk about the working groups, I'd want to find out from you, have you engaged local partners? You make mention of the fact that internationally, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, they are all ready to support this master plan. Let's come back home. Apart from the finance ministry, do we have the support of our local industry players?
Oh yes, I mentioned the Industry Review Committee, but if you notice, we had a working group that oversaw the development of the plan. And so the members who will be part of the working group and the steering committee includes the Ghana Stock Exchange, the CSD, the Ghana Securities and Investments Association, GSIA, and then we have the Ghana Investment Securities Institute, GISI. That's in charge of educating the market operators. It's a key part of the implementation framework of this plan. And we have their commitment. And you saw Bank of Ghana made some remarks at the launch. They also committed their support. NIC, National Insurance Commission, has also committed their support. And then we also have support from NPRA, National Pensions Regulatory Authority, who is also committed to ensuring the capital markets are strong, are robust, and are of the caliber that we can all be proud of, and that can help to grow our economy. So we have this around implementation. And once all these groups are commissioned, they can get to work in one implement. We have 3 phases. So phase 1 is stabilizing the markets, ensuring that we address some of the teething issues. We call it making the market attractive. And it runs from 2020 to 2022. So the next year actually is phase 1. And part of it is really the cleanup, the treasury bill market I mentioned, introducing some of the new products, green bonds, issuing the new guidelines, licensing guidelines, conduct of business guidelines. Those are all phase 1 initiatives that we are, I would say, midstream on. Then the phase 2 is increasing the competitiveness, right? So that involves bringing in products that deepen the market.
Competition.
We talked about the SMEs. Now we don't have that many SMEs. On the GACs, there are about 5 companies. So if we want to have, and if you think of 5 out of the companies registered in Ghana, 90% are SMEs, right? So if we are moving from 5, where do we go next? Are we looking at 30? Are we looking at 40? So that is the phase 2 growth. Phase 1 will just get a few more come on, but phase 2 will be expanding it. And then also getting some of the state-owned enterprises to come on the market. The stock exchange actually started from some of the SOEs coming on the market. You talk about GCB coming on the market, Cocoa, CPC, Ghana Cocoa Processing Company. Talk about PBC. These were all state-owned entities that came on the market. So we'll need the next round of state-owned entities coming on the market to drive growth. Then the final phase is consolidating the gains made. So, and that's important when you have a project like this, to phase it. You can't do everything at once. So you start off, you have your first set of initiatives, you have your second set of initiatives. So that's why it's a 10-year plan. Then in phase 3, beyond the initiatives comes the deepening and the assessments. And development doesn't just happen at once. Multiple things may be going at different times. And you have multiple streams of activity. So it's not like you turn on the light and everything is achieved. You turn on the light, some things happen the first 2 years, other things happen the next 2 years, and so on and so forth. And then some things might even come ahead of their time. Right. So we are flexible enough to accommodate these, but these are what we call priority areas where our energies will go to when we wake up in the morning and we come to work.
So for the ordinary Ghanaian watching us tonight, how can they participate in the activities on the capital market?
Thank you for that. Yes, there are a range of things happening. So for the ordinary person, I would say that buying treasury bills is a participation. Buying bonds, there are some companies that have issued bonds on the market. It's also a form of participation. Buying shares. Some people are skeptical because the stock market has not done too well over the past 2 years. But if you put it into perspective, this same period is when we had our financial sector cleanup, and then you had COVID hitting global markets. And Ghana as an economy has actually done quite well. I mean, we've handled the COVID. Our cases are actually moderate. We've seen innovation.
I mean, in the last 3 years, in the last 3 weeks, we haven't recorded any single death as a result of
COVID. And things that some countries have struggled with, masks, PPEs, Ghana is produced locally, which means that we have productive capacity to resist this virus. And how do we leverage that as an economy? And that's how come you've seen recently that now we are going to become a production hub. So now the pharmaceutical companies will benefit from being the manufacturers of these things.
Vaccines,
and one of them is actually listed, two of them actually on the exchange. Intravenous infusions, and then I think it's Danex, Starwin Danex. They've changed the name. They are also listed on the market. They're on the main board. Intravenous is on the GACs as well. So we have firms in this country that are able to adapt to this drastic change and way of doing business. And we hope that as people buy these shares, as people invest their resources, it helps to grow these businesses. For the businesses who are out there, those who are the CEOs, the entrepreneurs, what I'll encourage you to do is to seriously explore issuing additional securities on the stock market. But you also approach the venture capital and private equity firms that are in this market. There are some that are operating globally, but they look for investments in Ghana. So you can approach these firms initially to raise your fair set of capital. What they do require is that you have strong corporate governance. So you have a board that's properly constituted that meets regularly to assess investment decisions, to assess the strategic plans. This brings the discipline and the focus that is needed for the business to grow. And that allows ordinary Ghanaians also participate in your business. Because otherwise, standing from the side, every day we are buying your goods, but if I want to own part of what I'm buying, then I don't get to participate. So you're always keeping me as a customer, not as a shareholder. So we encourage you, explore issuing shares on the market so that ordinary Ghanaians can participate in your business. It doesn't mean you give up control all the time. It means that you abide by some laid down principles of corporate governance. You ensure that you issue financial accounts regularly. And occasionally you return dividends to people for them to also benefit from the success that they've helped you to create.
Let me take you to another realm. I mean, there's an issue that has dominated discussions, especially on social media. Some call it a turbulent ride in recent times. Some describe it as volatile in nature. Cryptocurrency or crypto trading. We understand there's a gray area, especially for SEC. Crypto trading. Are we going to see SEC take it upon itself to, educate Ghanaians on the dangers of how this whole trading is about?
I think a year or two ago we issued a public notice that we do not currently regulate the crypto space. And we also said that we will explore how to assess it because in a sense it's a bit of a conundrum. In some jurisdictions the regulators have taken a stance to oversee it. However, they all acknowledge the risks in it.
China has banned it.
Yes. So some regulators took a proactive stance to oversee it. Other regulators issued warnings and then were observing. Okay. There are inherent risks in how it operates. So if you lose your key, you cannot access your funds. And there is no central source to go for. So even if it is regulated, the other thing becomes how do we retrieve your funds if it's ended up outside the jurisdiction? And then the legal framework around it. What does it mean from a securities perspective? So we are assessing how to address it. Part of the initiatives in the master plan is to create what we call a fintech roundtable. Because as a regulator, we do not necessarily have all the knowledge to address some of these emerging areas. And there are people who understand it better. We'll bring them to a table to have a discussion around this and to formulate a policy. Because all said and done, if it is something that can improve transactions, and one of the key areas I've identified where crypto or the blockchain technology can help to reduce costs is remittances. And remittances are a big part of the inflows into our economy. So if something like that can help to streamline it, that's something we need to look at. And so there are a few dimensions to it. There's the current currencies in issuance. You might call them Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on. But there's also the technological element. which has implications. When we talk about our land registry, for instance, you can use blockchain to ensure that you have a secured key. When you sell property, I think in Rwanda now, when you buy a property, within 2 days, you have your title. Right, and it can be done. It means there's technological solutions around transfer of ownership. Even when we talk about the stock market, there's a possibility to use blockchain technology in implementing trades. So the settlement is almost instantaneous. Because now I'm sure you use mobile money and you use the banking system, instant pay. You push it, and the person has the money. It does.
I
It's
remember
almost
when the Momo thing
instantaneous.
came in earlier, people were skeptical, but now it's come to be widely accepted.
Exactly, exactly. However, that said, there are certain areas that need to be looked at thoroughly, especially if you don't have the safeguards in the system to address that. So I think coming out of this, we'll come out with a policy position, and that will be made public in due course.
So there's a joke on the street that even companies with office structures, companies that have office buildings that people can even walk to, they ended up being defrauded. How much a company that is on the black market that you cannot trace to any individual? What would be your advice to somebody who is still engaged in crypto trading?
Well, we've said that there are risks in there, and it's a space that, as it stands now in Ghana, we don't have the supervisory framework around it. So people are taking a risk when they go in there. So I want them to be aware of the risks in there. It's a speculative asset class. And so that is what I can say on it for now.
So wrapping up this conversation, Mr. Ababio, what is the timeline for those whose remaining funds have been converted into bonds? I'm talking about the government bailout program.
Okay. So actually the bailout program involved the establishment of a mutual fund vehicle with 2 tiers. Tier 1 being the short-term liquid portion, which was also funded with government bonds. Then tier 2 being the long to medium to long-term portion. So the tier 1, people can redeem their money now. The tier 2, you can redeem up to 20% on each anniversary. Okay, because it's funded with an amortizing bond. So that means that 1 year after, which will put us around October, would be when the redemptions can be done on the tier 2 portion. And then subsequently, every anniversary of the fund, they can do the withdrawals on the back of that. So that is the nature of it. It's a pooled scheme. Because when they did these investments, they were expecting that the fund manager will set up a portfolio with assets underneath it. Just that the assets in their case went bad. In this case, the assets are actually Government of Ghana bonds. So it's quite secure, and it's a stable investment to have. And that's what we expect that people can appreciate and have the confidence that the market systems can work. Yes.
Unfortunately, our time is up, but do you have any final words you'd want to share with our viewers? No,
I thank you very much for this opportunity. I would want to say that we are quite excited about the Capital Market Master Plan. We've gone through some difficult periods in this country dealing with some of the financial sector issues. Fortunately, a lot of these issues have been resolved. People have received their funds, and we are working hard to ensure that those who are still in the process get access to their funds. The market is poised for growth. And so I would encourage people to understand more about the market, understand about the various securities on the market and how to participate. And I think that with all our hands together at the wheel, we can achieve growth in our economy, we can achieve growth in the capital markets, and we'll all be better off for that. So thank you, and a good evening to your viewers.
Many thanks, Mr. Paul Ababio. And he took us through the Capital Market Master Plan and what it entails. He says we should all put our shoulders to the wheel and ensure that collectively we all achieve the economic growth for the country that we so desire. My name is Eko Anan. I sat in for your regular host, Nuang Falong. Make a date with us same time Tuesday for another exciting conversation on Spotlight. here on MX24 TV. Good night.